Have you ever hated someone so much that you wished you could erase them from your life? I have. The person was my father. People often say that time heals everything. Maybe it does for some people. But for me, every year only made the memory feel heavier. I grew older, but the pain grew with me. When I was 16, my father left our family. He packed one small suitcase. He stood by the front door for a long time. My mother was crying, but she did not beg him to stay. She only looked at the floor. I stood beside her, waiting for him to say something that would make everything better. He looked at me. His lips moved, but no words came out. Then he opened the door and walked away. I remember running after him. I shouted, "Dad, please don't go." He never turned around. That was the last time I saw him. After that day, our home became very quiet. My mother found a second job. She left before sunrise and came home late at night. Some evenings she was so tired that she fell asleep on the sofa without eating dinner. I learned how to cook simple meals. I learned how to wash clothes. I learned that growing up could happen much faster than anyone expected. One night I woke up because I heard someone crying. I walked to the living room. My mother was sitting alone in the dark. She was holding an old family photo. When she saw me, she quickly wiped away her tears. She smiled. "I'm fine," she said softly. I knew she was not. From that moment, I stopped waiting for my father to come home. I stopped talking about him at school. When my friends asked about my dad, I simply said, "I don't have one." It was easier than explaining. Years passed. I finished college. I found a steady job. I rented a small apartment across the city. My life looked peaceful from the outside. But every Father's Day, every family holiday, every birthday, the old anger came back. Sometimes I imagined meeting him again. In my mind, I had the perfect speech. "You left us. You left Mom alone. You don't deserve to call yourself my father." I repeated those words so many times that they almost became part of me. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I was finishing work when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. For a moment I thought about ignoring it. Instead, I answered. "Hello?" A calm woman's voice came through the phone. "Is this Emma?" "Yes." "My name is Sarah. I'm calling from Green Valley Hospital." My heart skipped a beat. "There is a patient here," she continued. "His name is Daniel Brown." The name hit me like cold water. I had not heard it in almost 20 years. "He asked us to call you." I closed my eyes. For several seconds I could not speak. Finally, I whispered, "You have the wrong person." The nurse paused. Then she said gently, "Before I let you go, there is one thing you should know." "What?" "He doesn't have much time left." I looked out the office window. Rain was sliding down the glass. People hurried along the street with umbrellas, trying to stay dry. My hand was shaking around the phone. For 20 years, I had dreamed about seeing my father again. Now that the chance was finally here, I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. I did not go to the hospital that day. I drove home instead. The whole way, my hands stayed tight on the steering wheel. The nurse's words kept playing in my mind. "He doesn't have much time left." I told myself it was not my problem. For 20 years he had lived without me. Now he could leave this world without me too. That night I could not sleep. I walked around my apartment. I made tea, but I forgot to drink it. I turned on the TV, but I did not hear a single word. Around midnight, I opened an old photo box. Most of the pictures were of my mother and me. At the bottom, I found one family photo. I almost threw it away. Instead, I stared at it. My father was smiling. I was sitting on his shoulders. I looked so happy. I could not remember that day. I only remember the day he left. The next morning I called my mother. She answered after the second ring. "Good morning, Emma." "Mom, did the hospital call you?" There was a long silence. "Yes," she said quietly. "So you knew." "I did. And you didn't tell me. I wanted you to decide for yourself." I felt my anger rise again. After everything he did, why would anyone visit him? My mother did not answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. "Because sometimes people carry questions for too many years." "I don't have any questions," I said. "You've been asking them in your heart since you were 16. Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. That afternoon I found myself standing outside Green Valley Hospital. The building looked cold and quiet. People walked in and out with tired faces. Some were smiling, some were crying. Life and goodbye seemed to exist in the same place. I almost turned around, but my feet kept moving. At the front desk, a nurse looked up and smiled. "You must be Emma." I nodded. "He has been waiting for you." Those words made my chest feel heavy. Waiting? He had not waited for me 20 years ago. Why was he waiting now? The nurse led me down a long hallway. The smell of medicine filled the air. Machines beeped behind closed doors. Every step felt slower than the last. Finally, she stopped in front of room 214. She gently knocked on the door. "He has a visitor," she said. Then she looked at me. "You can take your time." She walked away. For a full minute, I stood there without moving. My hand rested on the doorknob. I wanted to leave. I wanted to open the door. I wanted both at the same time. At last, I took a deep breath and walked inside. The man lying in the bed did not look like the father I remembered. He looked much older than his age. His face was thin. His hair was almost completely white. His strong shoulders were gone. The man who once carried me through the park now looked too weak to sit up alone. He slowly opened his eyes. When he saw me, they filled with tears. A small smile appeared on his face. "You came," he whispered. I said nothing. The room was so quiet that I could hear the clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. After a long silence, he spoke again. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." He lowered his eyes. "I understand." I crossed my arms. "No," I said. "I don't think you do." He looked at me, but he did not argue. Instead, he nodded once. "You're right." His calm answer surprised me. I had expected excuses. I had expected lies. I had even expected him to blame someone else. But he did none of those things. I looked straight into his eyes. For 20 years I had waited to ask one question. Now it was finally in front of me. My voice was cold. "Why did you leave us?" He closed his eyes. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he opened them again. "There is something you don't know." Before I could ask another question, someone knocked on the door. The doctor walked in, holding a large brown envelope. He looked at me and said quietly, "I think these belong to you." Across the front, written in familiar handwriting, were 2 simple words. "For Emma." I looked at the brown envelope for a long time. My name was written in blue ink. The handwriting looked careful, almost nervous. I knew it at once. It was my father's. The doctor placed the envelope in my hands. "He asked us to give this to you if you came," he said quietly. Then he left the room. My father did not look at me. He simply stared at the blanket covering his legs. "You can open it now," he said softly. My fingers felt stiff. The envelope was old. The corners were bent, and the paper had turned light yellow. Inside were many letters. Some were folded neatly. Some had small stains, as if someone had held them with wet hands. I picked up the first one. The date caught my attention. It was written only 3 months after my father left home. My heart began to beat faster. I unfolded the paper. The first line said, "Dear Emma." I stopped breathing for a second. I turned to another letter. Again, it began the same way. "Dear Emma," then another, and another. Every letter started with my name. There were birthday letters, Christmas letters, letters for my first day of college. One letter was written on the day I graduated. Another was written on my 25th birthday. There were more than 20 letters. One for almost every important year of my life. I looked up at him. "What are these?" "I wrote to you," he answered, "every year. I never stopped." I frowned. "That's impossible. I never received a single one." "I know." His voice was quiet. "They all came back." I stared at him. "Came back?" He nodded slowly. "I mailed every letter to the old house." I shook my head. "We lived there for years." "I know. Then why didn't they reach me?" He looked away. "I don't know." His answer made no sense. I opened another letter. The paper was still smooth. It had never been unfolded before. He had written about missing my piano recital. He wrote that he hoped I was making new friends at school. He even guessed that I might become a teacher because I loved reading when I was little. He was wrong about my job, but somehow he remembered the little girl I used to be. I felt something strange inside me. Confusion, nothing more. I quickly folded the letter again. "Letters don't change anything," I said. "They don't erase what you did." "I know." I wasn't trying to erase it. His answer came so quickly that I almost believed he had practiced saying it. The room became quiet again. Just then the door opened. A woman stepped inside. She looked surprised to see me. "Emma?" It took me a few seconds to recognize her. "Aunt Linda." She was my father's older sister. I had not seen her since I was a teenager. She gave me a gentle smile. "I'm glad you're here." I wasn't. At least I didn't think I was. She looked at the letters in my hands. "So, you finally saw them." I looked at her. "You knew about these?" She nodded. "I helped your father mail everyone." My head felt dizzy. "Then tell me something. Why didn't I ever get them?" She let out a slow breath. "I've wanted to answer that question for many years." She pulled a chair closer and sat beside me. Then she looked directly into my eyes. "Emma, your father did leave your family." She paused. "But he didn't leave because he stopped loving you." I felt my anger return. "Then why?" She looked at my father before speaking. "Because he believed leaving was the only way to protect the two of you." I almost laughed. "Protect us? By disappearing? It sounds ridiculous." "I thought so too," she admitted, "but I also know the whole story." I crossed my arms. "What story?" She reached into her handbag. Slowly she took out an old newspaper. The paper was faded with age. Across the front page was a photo. It was my father, much younger, standing outside a courthouse. Below the picture was a headline I had never seen before. And in that moment, I realized there was an entire part of his life that no one had ever told me. Everything I believed suddenly felt incomplete. My hands shook as I held the old newspaper. The paper was worn and fragile. Some words were hard to read, but one sentence was still clear. "Local businessman takes full responsibility for company accident." I looked at the photo again. The man standing outside the courthouse was my father. He looked tired, but he was not hiding from the cameras. I turned to Aunt Linda. "What happened?" She took a slow breath. "Your father owned a small construction company." I nodded. I remembered that much. "He trusted the wrong business partner. He signed papers without reading everything carefully. A few months later, there was a terrible accident at one of the work sites." I looked at my father. He kept his eyes on the floor. "No one died," Aunt Linda continued, "but several workers were badly hurt. The company was sued. Your father could have blamed his partner, but he didn't. He accepted the legal responsibility." I frowned. "Why?" "Because his name was on every document. He believed running away from responsibility would only hurt more people." She paused. "He lost almost everything. The company, the house, his savings." I tried to understand. "But why leave us?" Aunt Linda's eyes became wet. "Because he knew people would come after him. There were angry workers. There were reporters. There were people asking for money every day. He believed your mother and you would have a quieter life without him." I stared at my father. "Is that true?" He nodded once. "I thought I was protecting you." His voice was weak. "I was wrong. You needed a father, not a hero." His words filled the room. No one spoke. After a while, I asked the question that had lived inside me for 20 years. "Then why didn't you come back?" He closed his eyes. "I wanted to. So many times. But every year that passed made it harder. I was ashamed. I thought you would be happier if I stayed away." A small laugh escaped my lips. It was not a happy laugh. Happier. You have no idea what our life was like. I watched Mom work until she could barely stand. I watched her cry when she thought I was asleep. I hated you every single day. "I know." His answer was quiet. "I hoped you would." I looked at him with disbelief. "What?" "If hating me helped you keep moving forward, then I could accept that." Tears filled my eyes before I noticed them. I quickly wiped them away. "I don't want your pity. It's not pity. I don't want your excuses. They're not excuses." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I failed you." Those 3 words broke something inside me. He did not defend himself. He did not ask me to forgive him. He simply admitted the truth. I had imagined this meeting thousands of times. In every version, we argued. In every version, I walked away. But this silence hurt much more than any argument. A nurse entered quietly to check his medicine. She helped him adjust his blanket. As she lifted his arm, I noticed something I had never seen before. Long scars covered both of his hands. Some were thin. Others were deep. They looked old. When the nurse left, I could not stop looking at them. "What happened to your hands?" He smiled faintly. "I worked wherever I could. Factories, warehouses, construction sites, anything that paid enough. I wasn't educated. My hands were the only thing I had left. I remembered the hands that once held my bicycle when I was learning to ride, the hands that caught me when I fell, the hands that disappeared without saying goodbye. Now they were worn, scarred, and trembling. For the first time in 20 years, I stopped seeing the man who had abandoned me. I saw an old man who had spent years carrying regret. The past had not changed. My childhood was still broken. My mother had still suffered. None of that disappeared, but something inside me became quieter. Slowly, without thinking, I reached across the bed. My fingers touched his hand. He looked at me, surprised. His eyes filled with tears. He did not squeeze my hand. He did not speak. He simply held still, as if he were afraid that even the smallest movement would make me pull away. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. Some feelings are too heavy for words, and for the first time since I was 16 years old, I no longer felt hate. I only felt sadness. I stayed in the hospital until the sun began to set. The room grew darker. Golden light came through the window and rested on the floor. My father was still holding my hand. His grip was weak, but it was warm. After a long silence, he looked at me. "There is one more thing I need to tell you." I nodded. "I'm listening." He took a slow breath. "I never expected you to forgive me. I only hoped you would know the truth. I didn't want you to spend your whole life believing that I stopped loving you." Tears filled my eyes again. For years, I had believed exactly that. I thought he had chosen a new life over us. I thought we had never mattered. Now I knew something very different. He had made a terrible decision, one that hurt everyone he loved, but it had never come from a lack of love. Sometimes people make the wrong choice for what they believe is the right reason. That does not erase the pain, but it changes the way we see it. I looked at him. "You should have trusted us." He gave a small smile. "I know. We could have faced everything together." "I know. You didn't have to carry it alone." His eyes became wet. "I was afraid." Those 4 words sounded so simple, yet they explained 20 years of silence. For the first time in my life, I saw my father not as a hero, not as a villain, but as an ordinary person, a man who loved his family, a man who made a terrible mistake, a man who spent the rest of his life regretting it. The next morning, I returned to the hospital early. The hallway was unusually quiet. When I reached room 214, the nurse was waiting outside. She looked at me with kind eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "He passed away about an hour ago." I stood there without moving. The words felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else's story. The nurse handed me a small box. "He wanted you to have this." Inside was an old watch. I remembered it immediately. When I was little, I loved listening to its quiet ticking sound while sitting on his lap. Beneath the watch was one final letter. The paper was clean. The handwriting was slower than before. It simply said, "Dear Emma, thank you for giving me one last chance to see you. I cannot ask you to forget the past. I only hope you will not let it steal your future. Live a happy life. That has always been my greatest wish. Love. Dad." I read those words again and again. Then I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. A few weeks later, my mother and I visited his grave together. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Before we left, my mother gently held my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. I looked at her. "For what?" "For choosing peace." On the drive home, I kept thinking about those words. Choosing peace. Forgiveness did not change my childhood. It did not erase my mother's tears. It did not give me back the years we had lost. Some wounds never disappear completely. But forgiveness did something else. It broke the chain that had tied me to my anger for 20 years. For the first time, I felt free. Now, when people ask me if I have ever forgiven the person I hated the most, I always smile. My answer is yes. Not because he deserved it. Not because the past was suddenly beautiful, but because I finally understood something I had never known when I was 16. Forgiveness is not a gift for the person who hurt you. It is a gift you give yourself. The day I let go of my hatred, I did not change my father. I changed my own future. So let me ask you one question before this story ends. Have you ever forgiven someone you thought you never could? If your answer is yes, what changed your heart? And if your answer is no, maybe your story is not over yet.